To you by courtesy of ADEA, Association for the Development of Education in Africa, the Learning Generation International of the Education Development Center, EDC, and What Works Hub on Global Education, promoted by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, formerly known as UKAID. Today's edition is a kickoff of the new phase of the APF series. It's a webinar series that ADEA organizes to support knowledge mobilization and exchange among senior education policymakers in Africa. And the underlying basis is the fact that we, as ADEA, we are a knowledge organization. The APF is expected to help countries learn from each other, leverage insights and understanding to attain their commitment to end learning poverty. Remember that we were all in Kigali in November 2024 at the Africa Foundational Learning Exchange, where 34 countries agreed and committed to end learning poverty in 10 years, in a decade. And this is one key aspect, knowledge, one key way that we are trying to make that happen. Hence, we intend to build a community of practice of policymakers and foundational learning in education who can come and share actionable evidence and learning related to some of the things that they have done with commensurate results and even failings, focused on foundational literacy, numeracy, and social-emotional learning. This edition would focus on data and evidence-driven decision-making for foundational learning, and we will want to leverage experiences and insights from Ghana. Our panelists are already available, and we are almost good to go. On that note, I will want to bring in the Executive Secretary of ADEA, Mr. Albert Nsengiyumva, to open up the session and get us underway. My name is Chinedu Anarado. I'm the Communication Specialist at ADEA, and it's a pleasure to be your host today. Albert, I hand over the microphone to you. Thank you. Please, you can also impute your name, the organization you represent in the chat section while we are waiting for Albert to connect. Okay, let me ask Sam. Sam, can you come in with your session, and then once you're done, we can check whether Albert is ready to connect. I think we can go ahead with that. And then when Albert connects, we can open the floor and then introduce the Minister of Education, Rwanda. Albert, Sam, please, can you come in?
Okay. Thank you very much. Is someone sharing PowerPoint?
Mami, can you cue the PowerPoint on?
Right. So as we do that, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Sam Awuku from Learning Generation Initiative, Country Engagement Lead. We, as Chinedu just rightly said, we know that in 2020, Flex 2024 actually provide opportunity to our ministers of education, and we had more than 20 of them boldly committing to ending learning poverty by 2035. That bold commitment also aligned with the African Union's 10-year focus on foundational learning. When we talk of foundational learning, we are actually looking at key areas. Before I talk about key areas, let me also just amplify a bit what that call to action is to all of us on the continent, to ensure that by 2035, every child by age of 10 is actually reading. In some countries, they've actually reduced it to 7 years, and some say 8 years. Good to be very ambitious. But this call of action also, or to make it work, it brought the establishment of a continental accountability mechanism that's going to track the foundational learning outcomes. And at the same time, it's also integrated foundational learning. We have the ESSA, foundational learning have been integrated into that. And then we also looking at the the South Africa's G20, they had that not long ago. Foundational learning is also embedded in that. So you can see that the whole continent is ginger up for to make foundational learning integral part of what happened in our schools and out of school. When we talk about foundational learning in this context, we are looking at the three key areas. We look at language literacy, we look at mathematics literacy, which we call numeracy, and then we're also looking at the social skills and values that make up the individual, preparing them for the world of work, preparing them for adulthood. Now, this series, as Shindu rightly mentioned, there is in 8 parts. Today is the first one. We are launching it, and we're going to be looking at data for decision making. But then there are other parts that's going to be happening. There are 7 other areas that we're going to focus on. We'll be giving you opportunity very soon for you to tell us which ones you really want for us to engage you on. The first one talk about teachers. And then we're talking about structured and innovative pedagogies. The second one will be looking at assessment. And we know that assessment is critical. And if assessment is critical, what comes out of assessment is data. How do we use data? We're going to have a specific session on that. We're going to have a session on system. I always talk about if the systems are not well in place, then nothing will really happen. What are the best practices on a continent in terms of having a political commitment and capacity to make foundational learning work? We will have time to engage on language, and language that we're talking of language of teaching and learning, foundational learning. Which language should we use? In some of our countries, we have multiple languages. What has been the approach in using a specific language to enable foundational learning to work? Everything rise and fall on leadership. We also have opportunity to look at leadership, and here we'll be looking specifically at pedagogical leadership and the support that is provided. By extension, we can actually talk about teacher leadership as well for foundational learning. We come to the classroom environment itself. What kind of classroom will be conducive for foundational learning to work? And then all of this will depend on a specific curriculum. What are the practices across the continent and beyond the continent relating to how foundational learning is coded within the curriculum that is used in schools, and how is that decoded through all the things that we just mentioned for it to benefit the young people, prepare them for further studies, world of work, and adult life. We'll give you opportunity now to tell us the topics that we just shared with you. Which of them do you think we should do first, and to help us arrange them in order for your benefit? So I will defer to my colleague, Corey, who will then take the poll with you, and I'll come back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam. There's a poll right on your screen. Please select your answers and submit to all participants, especially the country technical focal persons who are on the call with us. Which 3 levers would you like the next session on the APF webinar series to focus on? Do you want it to be about teachers, including structured and innovative pedagogic approaches? Do you want it to be about learning assessment, data and evidence for decision making? I'm sure that we are treating that topic now. Or would you like it to be about curriculum, evidence-based teaching and learning materials? Is it about safe and supportive classroom and learning environments? Or do you want to speak about teacher leadership, pedagogical leadership, or school leadership as we know it? Select an option and then click Submit. If you've done it, let us know. It's going to be one key question and then submitted. While that is happening, I think Albert is right back on the call with us. Albert, can you confirm?
Yes, I'm back, and sorry, I got disconnected at some point here. Thank you, I'm here.
It's a pleasure to have you with us, Albert. I'd like you to officially open up the session, and then right after you can invite the Minister of Education for Rwanda to set the stage for us, and then we can get going.
Thank you, Chinedu. Thank you, Sam, for sharing some of the key aspects of this Africa Policy Forum on foundational learning and especially on data. Honorable Minister Joseph, represented here my old friend Pascal Gatabazi, who is the technical advisor to the minister. Thank you, Pascal, for stepping in, and other colleagues from the ministry present here. Distinguished policymakers, country technical focal point present, education expert and partners, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by expressing our sincere appreciation to colleagues, especially representing Minister Joseph, as I said, Pascal Gatabazi, and other colleagues from the Ministry of Education in Rwanda. As you recall, Rwanda hosted the last Flex 2024, November last year. So thank you for joining us today and honoring this important forum with your presence. I also wish to warmly acknowledge the partners for today's sessions, particularly the Learning Generation Initiative of the Education Development Center and the Works Hub of the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. Our partnership speaks to the collective vision we share for education in Africa. Today's conversation focuses on one of the most powerful yet under-leveraged assets in our continent's development journey. We are talking about data and evidence to inform decision-making. It is indisputable that data is the lifeblood of transformation. Whether we speak of the 2024 Flex Declaration of Action, the African Union Agenda 2063, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or countries' national education plan and strategies, none can be realized without quality data. We know that effective decision-making begins with quality data. Data does more than count. It actually tells the story. It tells us where we are falling behind, where we are making progress, and where we focus our limited resources for the most significant impact. Therefore, without quality data, we are flying blind. Quality data can help us identify and address our needs and aspirations. But let me be clear, simply producing data will not be enough. Data must be analyzed, interpreted, and used to shape policy, monitor progress, evaluate impact, and hold systems accountable. When data is lacking or worse, ignored, informed development stalls. We cannot afford that risk in Africa, and especially around this time where we're living in a scarcity of resources than never before. So let me pose a question that I hope will remain beyond today's dialogue. What will it take for data to enable true transformation in Africa's educational system? At ADEA, we are fully committed to leading this charge. Through our project on tackling education and skill data challenge, we are on the ground in some of your countries and soon in Ghana, engaging with you and local stakeholders to jointly work towards deepening the use of data, to sensitize leaders at different levels and raise their appetite for data-driven decision-making. The initiative is about targeting 30 countries on the continent and hopefully even beyond. And we hope this will have to transform and transformation in our system in terms of capturing data analysis, interpretation, and consume for decision-making. And this is so important, as you can imagine, because in the end, we're looking ways of improving learning outcome and support building resilient education system on the continent. Through platforms like this community of practice, we aim to catalyze dialogue, share knowledge, and amplify successful approaches. These efforts are not ends in themselves. They are pathways to real solutions that will shape the education landscape across our continent. We believe that improving sustainable production and utilization of data is a shared task. It requires political will, robust institutional framework, adequate financial, technical, and human resources, and above all, strong partnership between governments, civil society, the private sector, and international allies. Everyone has a role to play in this particular regard. As I close, I want to leave you with one key message. We must invest in quality foundational learning data. Once again, to our partners, LGI, EDC, What Works Hub for Global Education, and countries representative, I would like to express again our appreciation and also your support, your unwavering support and commitment to this cause. To all participants, particularly the countries represented here, I wish a fruitful and inspiring discussion. Let us make this moment count for our systems, our teachers, and most importantly, for the children and youth of Africa. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Albert, for your very incisive message, direct, and the one that is actually quite rousing and calling us to action. We must invest in quality foundational learning data. And that leads us to the question you asked, whether this is actually what we need to enable true transformation in Africa's education system. But before I push a little bit further, let me invite the Honorable Minister of Education in Rwanda, Honorable Joseph Nsengimana, ably represented by the Chief Technical Advisor within the Ministry of Education Rwanda, Mr. Pascal Gatabazi, to add and set the stage for this conversation. If you recall clearly, the design of this initiative, this webinar series, is actually targeted at ensuring countries have the information, insights, and data that they need to be able to implement the sort of reforms that they would like to see in foundational learning in their countries. Hence, it's important that we effectively amplify the voice and impact for countries. So, Honorable Pascal, please, I'm inviting you to take the floor and deliver the Honorable Minister's message. Thank you.
Thank you, Chinedu. Just to make sure that my gadget is working well, can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear, and we
Okay.
can see you clearly. It's good to see you, sir.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Executive Secretary Albert. Thank you, Chinedu. Thank you, our very own Sam, also for the few remarks at the beginning. Sam has always been a good colleague of ours. We have worked together. So as introduced, my name is Pascal Gatabazi. I'm the Chief Technical Advisor, the Minister of Education. I'm happy to stand in for the Minister. Honorable Minister would have loved to be here. Foundation learning is on top of our agenda. So it's just because of the crash program. Otherwise, he would have loved to be here. Also, building on the opportunity that Rwanda had last year to host Flight 2024. So let me read a few remarks that were prepared for the Minister to deliver. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, representatives from the Ministry of Education across the continent. The Minister wanted to mention that it is an honor to be invited for us to give the opening remarks for the relaunch of the Africa Policymakers Forum, organized by the Association for Development of Education in Africa, our very own ADEA, and the Learning Generation Initiative, LGI, at the Education Development Center, EDC, under the banner of of the What Works Hub for Global Education. This webinar, under the theme Data and Evidence for Decision-Making, has come at an opportune moment. Last year, during the Africa Foundation Learning Exchange, Flux, which the Minister of Education hosted here in Rwanda, African governments committed to ending learning poverty on the continent by 2030, as already alluded to by previous speakers. Data is a significant component of attaining this goal. During that conference, governments committed to enhancing the production and utilization of quality data, evidence assessment, and accountability mechanisms. This webinar aligns with this commitment and provides a peer learning opportunity to all countries present. Foundation learning data and evidence is vital because a strong foundation literacy, numeracy, and the social skills predicts future academic success, higher levels of education, and enhanced life opportunities. Learning data and evidence helps us identify challenges early enough and intervene effectively, preventing learning gaps from widening. It allows us to monitor student progress closely and make informed decisions about instruction methods at the classroom level. Additionally, it can be used to develop individualized programs for struggling learners. We need foundation learning data to inform and actualize policies and systems reforms that enable us, respective countries, to realize our vision for foundation learning. We are glad to know that ADEA is expanding its support to countries to improve the use of data in decision-making, including foundation learning data on the Tackling Education and Skill Data Challenge project. This effort will contribute to building a culture of data use among policymakers across the continent, especially in foundation learning. Evidence-based strategies are essential for enhancing our education system and ensuring our learners achieve their full potential. Today, we will hear from Ghana's experience in generating and utilizing foundation learning data and how this has improved their foundation learning interventions. The speakers will discuss research conducted and publications based on foundation learning data generated on the continent and various data sources governments can employ for decision-making. To conclude these remarks, we urge you to actively participate in these nine-path webinar series, ask questions, and share your experiences. Foremost, American management consultant Edward Deming said, "In God we trust, all others must bring data." Let us embrace the power of data to create a more equitable and effective education system for all our learners. Remember, data is not just about numbers. It's about understanding our students better and empowering them to succeed. I wish you all a productive and insightful session. Thank you so much. Murakoze.
Thank you so much, Honorable Pascal Gatabazi, representing the Honorable Minister of Education in Rwanda, Honorable Joseph Nsengimana. Let me, without much delay, bring in our colleagues from LGI, Learning Generation Initiative, Corey Blackenbeckler, to share some technical insights on the value of data and evidence in decision-making in foundational learning. Corey, please take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm having my camera on just for a minute, but then I'll change it and take it off for bandwidth issues. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. As I said, my name is Corey Blankenbeckler. I'm here to speak about how we can use data and evidence to drive meaningful progress in foundational learning. Some of these ideas may be very familiar to you, others might be new. Either way, I hope this session sparks rich discussion about how we can use data in the right way to strengthen reforms across our systems. So foundational learning covers the basics: reading, writing, arithmetic, and even core social emotional skills like focus and cooperation. These are essential not just for success in schools, but for life. Without them, learners struggle to benefit from the rest of the education system. Investing in foundational learning pays off, not just in education outcomes, but also in productivity, health, and civic participation. It's one of the highest return investments governments can make for long-term development. But the reality is stark. 70% of 10-year-olds can't read a simple sentence, and the numbers are often even higher than that. COVID-19 made this situation far worse, and when children fall behind in the early grades, they rarely catch up very quickly. Without a solid foundation, even well-designed remediation or secondary or tertiary investments won't yield much. The results are costly and cannot be easily recovered. So how do we improve foundational learning? To improve it, we must start with data and evidence, as has already been shared. We need to diagnose the real issues around the levers of foundational learning shown here, the ones that Sam went through earlier. We need to understand if children are learning and how, and if they're not, what factors contribute to the setbacks. We can use this data and evidence to set realistic targets, to allocate resources where they're most needed, and to use feedback to keep learning and improving. That's the heart of evidence-based reform. So how do we do this? What types of data and evidence matter? What is useful? Well, firstly, we need to go beyond enrollment numbers, essential, but not enough. The most effective reforms are grounded in diagnostic evidence. They rely on tested solutions, and they include feedback loops so we can keep adapting. This cycle ensures reforms are context-specific and actually work. Diagnostic evidence helps us to understand what's going wrong and why, but also what's going right and how can we maintain that. Tested solutions offer practical approaches that have shown results. Feedback loops help us to track and adjust in real time. This cycle allows us to move away from a one-size-fits-all approach and towards reforms that are context-specific and adaptive. It's particularly important in foundational learning, where small adjustments can make a big difference. In most systems, early grades are overlooked in assessment policy. There are no high-stakes exams, which is probably a good thing for younger students. But that means that foundational learning often goes unmeasured and unnoticed. That's a big problem. Without data in grades 1 through 3, we're essentially flying blind during the most important years for building literacy and numeracy. This is where diagnostic assessments come in. Tools like early grade reading assessment, or PASEC, that's used in Francophone African, and other national learning assessments give us a window into what learners know and, more importantly, what they don't. These assessments aren't about ranking schools. They're about understanding learning needs so that we can act early before gaps become entrenched. Assessments are just the beginning. We also need to understand why behind the numbers. This means reviewing the curriculum to see if it's age appropriate, observing classrooms to see how time is used, and analyzing whether learners are being taught in a language they understand. We also need to look at teacher knowledge in class and practice. These diagnostics help us identify the root causes, so we're not just treating the symptoms, but actually solving the problem. What makes a solution tested isn't just what's implemented, it's that it aligns to how children actually learn. The science of learning tells us that young children need explicit, structured, and developmentally appropriate instruction to build core skills like decoding, fluency, and number sense. Some programs, like Tusome in Kenya, have shown results. They're grounded in how the brain develops in early childhood. Grouping students by ability levels, as in teaching at the right level, or using mother tongue instruction in the early grades, also reflects this science. These approaches aren't just practical, they're backed up by what research shows about how children absorb, retain, and build knowledge from the ground up. Implementation doesn't stop when a program rolls out. We need feedback loops to stay on track. This means using real-time data like school-level dashboards, teacher feedback tools, and classroom observations to see what's working and where we need to adjust it. It also means piloting new materials or models before we scale them. In foundational learning, where mistakes are harder to fix later, feedback allows us to respond quickly and keep improving. So we can think about applying the learning cycle to use of data and evidence across key stages of the policy formation and implementation process. We start by spotting the problem. We using diagnostic evidence to identify learning gaps, highlight who's being left behind, and create a sense of urgency. This often comes from the national assessments, donor studies, or citizen-led data. In shaping policy, we need to apply tested solutions. This means choosing interventions that fit the context and are cost-effective, often guided by evidence briefs, technical groups, or stakeholder consultations. In planning for actions, we need to align our plans with evidence. This includes setting measurable goals and focusing resources based on the EMIS data, readiness assessments, and other monitoring frameworks. To keep reforms on track, we need to build in feedback loops to track progress, make mid-course adjustments, and respond to what we're seeing in real time using the dashboards, the school feedback, and reviews. Finally, we need to reflect on what worked, document lessons, and scale up what delivers results. This is where the final evaluations and joint reviews feed directly back into strategy. This approach matters more in foundational learning than anywhere else. Early learning is often overlooked. It's not tested, it's not politically visible often, and it's harder to fix later. Foundational learning is deeply contextual, and small missteps early on have huge consequences. That's why we need to treat policy as a learning process. If we want real change, we need to get serious about how we use data, not just to track progress, but to drive smarter decisions from the start. So, as we've already been called to, let's lead with curiosity, precision, and a shared commitment to make foundational learning work for every child. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Corey. Thank you for your kind words. Let me cede it immediately to Dominic Okulo for a presentation on how to use data for decision-making. Dominic works with Education Sub Saharan Africa. Dominic, please come in.
Thank you so much. My name is Dominic, and as been rightly said, I work with Education Sub Saharan Africa, where we do research around education, and that the research and data that is produced aligns with the policies of different countries. So, as has been said by several other people have come before me, is that data is important, and data must be accessible to different countries and to different people. So the presentation I'm going to make is about the research that has been done, the mapping exercise that has been done to see where is this data found and how is it found. Because foundational learning has been with us for some time, but there has been this data out there. So we just want to see where can we get this data and how is it done. So one of the research that we did at Education Sub Saharan Africa, ESSA, is to do a mapping exercise of the foundation learning data that is around, that in published and in local repositories. So we looked at data that is found from different university websites, that is locally available, and also data that is in the international databases, so that we can be able to inform countries of where they can be able to find data. there are a lot. What we found out is there's a lot of data that is in local repositories that may not be available in international databases, as we will see. And most of this data is published in English, around 92%, with a few in French, and also a very low percentage in Portuguese. So if we look at the map that we have, it shows how spread the data that the foundational learning data is from the international databases. So you find that most of the data comes from the countries that are in deep green, and also some in the Western countries, so around East Africa and Western. Then there are also a few data that is spread across. So this map tends to show us how data is spread across the African countries and that data in foundational learning that is in the international databases. So we did try to compare. If you look at data that, as I had mentioned, data that is found in the international databases and data that is found in local repositories, you will find across the 4 countries that we focused our research on. One thing that is clear is that the local repositories have a lot of data, but the problem that most of this data may not be able to be seen if you search for them in the international databases. So there's already research. What this shows that there's already research that is being done, but some of this research doesn't get into the limelight that we will see. So if you move across the countries, Kenya, Senegal, Tanzania, and Ghana, you find that there's a lot of data in the local repositories that within the universities or in government offices that is just published, but that data stays there. At times, it does not get into international database that can inform other people of what is happening within the country. So that's an important thing that we need to note. We also went further and looked at what themes are covered in most of the research that is done around foundational learning. Then you find that literacy is research. Most of the publications that we have, either in journals or within the universities, both by Sub-Saharan African authors, are in the literacy field. There's very little that is done in socio-emotional learning, and there's also a very small percentage that is done in numeracy. But during the introduction, I think we did hear that foundational learning cuts across all of these fields. So this informs the different countries that it is important to look at foundational learning in a more holistic view, other than focusing more on literacy a bit of it. We also looked at the thematic areas that are covered, what is by different countries. We know we see literacy is mentioned a lot in most of the articles that are done, followed by learning assessment, then studies dealing with language, teachers and teaching, curriculum, equitable education, numeracy, education access, social environmental facilities, policy and financing, and ICT. So again, literacy takes precedence in the number of most of the papers that are found, followed by learning assessment, as we can see. And this can be able to inform us in terms of data, then where do we want to focus and where do we have some of the problems. So how has this mapping been used, or how could it be used by the different countries in the Africa continent to try, or in Sub-Saharan Africa, to try and elevate the foundational learning? One, it helps us to understand the kind of foundational research that's available in Sub-Saharan Africa. As I've mentioned, the issues around foundational learning has been with us for some time now. Several years ago, we have been talking about foundational learning. So this kind of mapping helps us to know what has been done, what has been found, so that we see where to focus our new energies around foundational learning. It also helps us to coordinate the future research to focus on research gaps identified, as I've mentioned. And ESSA and the REAL Center, which is Research in Education Learning Center, which we partner with, we are organizing in-country specific convenings to try and bring together policymakers, implementers, and researchers to discuss and identify country-level specific research gaps that need to be addressed. So we are doing this in 3 countries, in Ghana, in Kenya, and also Senegal. But this is something that when we have this kind of data can be used by different countries and can be spread so that each and every country can be able to come up with research, locally relevant research gaps that they have so that they can be able to solve. So we also know that available and reliable country-specific data evidence could help in decision makers to know where to invest their limited funds, how to update or adapt their foundational learning curricula to ensure that the improvement in teaching and learning outcomes. So this kind of mapping exercise becomes very, very important. So these are just the links to some of the reports. You can also go to our ESSA website for a number of reports on foundational learning and mapping exercise for a deeper dive into the work that ESSA and the Real Center have done in understanding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dominic, for the quick turnaround. I think now we are getting into the meat of the matter, and we are now ready to unpack exactly how Ghana is able to navigate the issue of data in foundational learning. Let me invite Professor Yayra Dzakadzi to come and give us his perspectives and thoughts on some of the experiences that he's implemented in Ghana. Prof, welcome to APF, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm grateful, Chinedu, for the introduction, and I want to remark that last week I was the Director General for the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment. But as we speak, I'm idle. I don't have any job to do. So to start with, I was in charge of the National Standardized Test and gathering data for decision to be made in Ghana. So I'm available. If any job, I'm here. Okay, so next slide. That will be a brief of introduction. Yes. Okay, so in Ghana, we have embarked on a rigorous exercise to gather data on foundational learning. And we do this in three folds currently. So we have the data being collected on the P2, and then that's primary 2. We also collect on grade 4 as well as P6 or grade 6. So at the P2 level, where we are dealing with learners who are not so much matured, we use the Tangerine platform to collect the data. And basically, it's one-on-one for the student or for the learner. So we engage the test administrator to collect these data, and then it's loaded on a Tangerine app, and then we analyze. For the P4, that is grade 4 and grade 6 learners, we use the scannable sheets where we expect the learner to respond to the item, the test items that are put together. And we use the scannable machine to scan it and generate the data for analysis. So that is how we collect the data and then analyze. So the scanned responses of learners were secured to a digital platform, and then to minimize the data loss. So the data was stored on an external drive and even a cloud, and it's kept solely with the Director General of the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment. To add, the access to the data is solely by the Director General, but he may also grant access to any staff to release the data or to work on the data. The data is used for various decision making. One key aspect is currently a committee has been put in place to review the curriculum from the PKG to P6. And this is as a result of the data we gathered last year. It also informs the design of tailored interventions for learners. So with the data, when we talk about foundational learning, we all know it's about literacy and numeracy. And we kind of try to put the numeracy into some strands. So the strands includes the geometry, measuration, and then we also talk about algebra. So these strands are put together to form the test. So we try to do further analysis on the strand to be able to identify some weaknesses within even within the numeracy as well as the literacy. So the data gathered also guides in resource allocation for the schools, the resource allocation for the various schools that we have across the country. Yeah, so I try to give an overview of so far what we have done and what we have achieved in terms of literacy as in English and numeracy as well. Okay, so when you look at the overall score at P4 in terms of numeracy and literacy, you'll see that we've done some trend analysis that we've seen some kind of improvement. From 2021, you'll see 18.90 in English, and you'll see 60.10 in mathematics. So when you come to 2024, which is the current data, we are looking at in percentage terms, we're talking about 60.89, and in English, which is the literacy, and we are talking about 57.47, which is numeracy. So we've made a lot of gain from 2021 to 2024. And even if we talk about within a group or between group assessment, we have made gains in terms of our foundational learning. So we can look at the proficiency level. Next slide. Let's look at the proficiency level and look at how we have advanced in the proficiency and how we have got some basic proficiency, which is moving to the advanced. So in mathematics, we have 22.5, 22.59, and then advanced proficiency. Then proficiency we have 20.94%, and then basic proficiency we have 18.03%, and below proficiency we have 38.44%. Making at the P4 level, we are having 61.56% in terms of foundational learning in numeracy. But for proficiency in English, we are talking about advanced, which is 29.36. And then for basic proficiency, so we have 21.15. Basic proficiency, we have 14.64. And in terms of English, we have 59.73 as the foundational learning shock. So when you put the two together, we are looking at 60% in terms of weighted average. We are looking at 60% as foundational learning recorded at the P4 level. Again, we try to look at the percentages, the trends of percentages in the various years. So 2021, 2022, 2024, 2021, 2022, and 2024 in terms of literacy and numeracy. And we can see a steady progress from even advanced people moving from proficiency to advanced proficiency, basic proficiency to proficiency, and people moving from below proficiency to basic proficiency, and that continues. In fact, we've done a further analysis to even show that some learners have moved from below proficiency to advanced. Few of them have moved from below proficiency to advanced proficiency within a year under review, and while some stay around proficiency as well as basic proficiency. So you see that the basic proficiency is getting lower at 2024. So you see the basic proficiency at 38.44%. Okay, so we further look at some analysis at the P6 level. So overall, we look at the P6 analysis. Yeah, so at the P6, this is the first time in the history of the country that we've conducted a census assessment across the grade 6. So we don't have a base year to really compare with. Let me also indicate that these particular learners took the exam in P4 or grade 4 before coming to P6. So we have recorded much gain for them as a result of the intervention we provided at grade 5. The grade 5 basically is the intervention year. So you see that we have a percentage of 61.56% in English or literacy, and we have 57.04 in mathematics or numeracy. So you can see that there have been much improvement even in the percentages as well as the mean scores are also concerned. So again, we try to look at proficiency levels in terms of the various learners. So we have seen that in English language, the proficiency level has increased. And then we now have 68%, almost 70% in terms of proficiency attained in English language. And then in mathematics, we have 62%. That is the numeracy. We have 62% in terms of foundational learning. So when you try to get the two together, we are talking about 65% foundational learning level at the grade 6. Basically, we expect to use this data to strengthen curriculum continuity. We are expected to reduce learning poverty across the country by coming up with some interventions. We also use the data to increase retention and the completion rates of the learners. So we have also used it to better transition the learner to competency-based learning and also improve performance in high-stake exam, which the learner may take in the later years of education. Again, it also improves equity and inclusion and also empower the teachers and teaching methods in our educational system. Indeed, I must also remark that it is the vision and the legacy of the minister to make early grade education with foundational learning as his legacy and priority. Hence, much resources are being put into it. Thank you. Thank you. I'm grateful for the attention.
Thank you so much, Prof. You quite some very interesting insights. It will be good to see exactly how some of these information and insights have basically informed the deployment of pedagogical resources to support learning in the classroom, but also to see if how much it was also able to inform some sort of resource allocation. Would there be one or two ideas or insights in this regard you could like to share with us before I open the floor for additional questions from some of the country participants on the webinar?
I didn't hear you well. Could you come again, please? Yes.
So I wanted to see how some of these data that you've shared with us, I mean, looking at the improvement in literacy and numeracy, may have sort of affected or impacted on how resource allocation was done within this education system or foundational learning system in Ghana. For instance, how were you able to inform deployment of teachers, for instance, the budgeting for some sort of activities, or what schools exactly got what, resources or not? Do you have any interesting perspectives in this regard that you could share with us?
Yeah, so we have some interesting perspectives. What we have with a project called the Ghana Education and Gallup activity. So under the Gallup project, we try to give some intervention to teachers. We also have the CPD program that is organized for teachers to better inform them as to the strands that some of them may not be very competent in. For example, as I said in the mathematics or the numeracy, you may have a learner not doing well in numeracy in a particular school. But further investigation may show that maybe it's not about the learner, but it's about the teacher as a resource. So there's a need for us to build that teacher's capacity. The teacher may be good in algebra, but the teacher is not good in, say, measuration. So the teacher needs to be trained, or capacity needs to be built for that teacher to be able to take care of that aspect that appears to be his own weaknesses that is reflecting on the learner. So we try to also do some teacher rationalization to see how best these things could be done. Teachers are provided with some basic resources based on whatever we realize by the data. So the data is zoomed to the schools also. So we have a school per school data. So we're able to tell that these are the issues that each school is facing and how we provide some form of remediation. And we're also thinking of getting to them some prep items for them to continue practicing before we come out with the next test, maybe in the next year. So these are the interventions that we have provided to ensure that some of these things are, some of the weaknesses that are identified are improved upon. Teacher rationalization, resource allocation, among others. Teacher capacity building are also done. Yes.
And I love the perspective you shared about issues around teacher capacity building, because tentatively these are some of the areas we miss out where we are chasing resources for some of the much more tangible things. There would also be resources. There would also be resources in terms of reading materials that could help countries double down or a little bit improve their understanding on this. Maybe we can reach out to you as ADEA much later to see if we can even record a podcast in this regard. But before we let you go, I think it's good to open up the floor to see what other perspectives, viewpoints exist in countries across the continent, especially among country representatives. We'd like to see, short insights or case studies or thoughts from experiences from other perspectives. I know I can see representatives from Togo, Sierra Leone, Rwanda, Zambia, and so on and so forth. Would anybody like to take the floor to share their perspectives from their country in terms of how they are using data to improve foundational learning, or even ask some interesting questions that can help us unpack a little bit further some of the decisions that, or some of the conversations that we've just, experienced or heard from. The floor is open. Just raise up your hand and I'll come to you. If you want to speak, say anything, ask questions, share your own experience or perspectives, just unmute your mic and then we would bring you on the spot to speak. Feel free to share your experience.
Hello.
Hi, Annette. We can hear you clearly. Can you introduce yourself and the country you represent, and then you can go ahead with your thoughts, question.
Thank you very much for the coordination, and I appreciate presentation from Ghana. My name is Mugisha Annette, and I work with the Ministry of Education in Uganda. I have a question to my colleague from Ghana. I want to say that I've noted that Ghana has a lot of things that they have done, which we have done in our countries, but I just wanted to ask that how have they used the data to address issues, first of all, to know who are retiring every year, the teachers, which grade, and who are being promoted. How many teachers do they have at primary, at secondary? How many are in private? How many are in government? And how many are trained every year at every level? Does absorb all of them? Can this data, or have they got a system that is helping them to know this information? I submit.
Thank you so much, Annette. I think since it's a question, we will take additional ones, and then I would ask Professor Yayra to come in and then answer to some of them. Do we have any other question on the call? Please unmute your mic and speak, or make your submissions, and then I can then bring Prof back in to address some of the questions that are coming up. And thank you so much, Annette, for your question.
Hello, good afternoon, yes, from Sierra Leone.
Yes, Abdul, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Abdul Abakar from Sierra Leone, the statistician and data analyst. Last year, we did our first national learning assessment on P4 pupils. Basically, it was an eye-opener wherein we see the gaps in our learning. When we talk about learning poverty, it's too much for our country, as just 15% are out of that learning poverty group, because mainly we tested this P4 pupils, that is grade 4, we are in try to see their foundation, basically in terms of foundation for P1 to P3, if how competent are they for that P4, and also how prepared are they for the remaining grades. We are in, because we're by grade 6, which is P6, we expect them to take their school leaving examination for primary school to transit to the senior secondary school. So we find out that so many of these pupils, they cannot read and they cannot do some basic arithmetic. And also we found out that there's a problem also with the teachers, especially in the rural areas. We have poorly equipped teachers because so many of those teachers, they want to stay in the urban areas. These schools mostly are public schools supported by the government. And then for us to have teachers to go to these rural areas to teach, it's very difficult. So they only make do with what they have. And many of those teachers, they are not doing well in terms of teaching the pupils. So that's why you see they cannot meet to the curriculum. And so many of them cannot pass the exams. And we gather a lot from this exercise wherein we were able to share last month the results with the districts. We interact for them to see how we can better off this in terms of the teaching, in terms of improving the curriculum, and in terms of how we can improve learning outcomes. One other thing that you see is, most of the schools, they miss a significant part of the sessions. We see whether by absenteeism or whether by not going to school, not holding school. So we see almost half of a term is being missing when we take the 3 terms, because we have a 3-term system. So because of some will not go to school for the first 2 weeks or when school reopen, then the end parts towards examination, they will not, they miss a lot of sessions. So this also affects in terms of how we do. The third thing is in terms of the assessment, we contracted the OPM, Oxford Policy Management, which is an international institution. I think it's now high time we started using African researchers in terms of helping us in doing this thing. Also, this I'll ask you guys out there which one you can recommend that we can work with, and at the end of the day, the resources will be with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abdul, and thank you for your views and perspectives. I think the bit about using African institutions to chase or collect data is also something we can unpack maybe at an edition to see exactly how much capacity is growing on the continent and what we can afford to leverage. But let me come back to Prof with the 2 questions we have already, and then have him respond to those, and then we can get back and get more questions from the audience. So the first question from Annette from the Ministry of Education, Uganda, was requesting to see exactly how under your tenure at NaCCA, you use data to address teacher attrition, promotion, teacher division between primary, secondary school, and private or government institutions, and how many teachers and how you are able to understand to know how many teachers are exposed to CPD or trained annually, and if you've also have got a system that helps you understand and see this information in a manner that helps you make a decision. I can also see a question from Jackie on the chat on what interventions were conducted to explain the gains presented in your in the gains presented in numeracy and literacy in Ghana. Maybe you can take the first one from Annette, and then you can address Jackie's questions. Prof, over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, so let me talk first about the teacher deployment issues and all that. So we have the EMIS data system that gives, which is a live data, that gives us information about most of the things that happens in the educational sector in Ghana. And again, talking about the CPD issues, yes, teachers are licensed. There's a license procedure, a license regime for teachers, and teachers are expected to earn some points on the CPD to be able to renew their licenses. So with these, teachers are compelled to really attend some of these CPD workshops in order to renew their licenses in future. So it goes without saying that it's a motivation to them. Government has given some form of grant also to them to enable them undertake these CPD exercises. I think Sam knows much about this, so he may collaborate my statement when I'm done. For the various interventions that we put across, as I said, we are able to do analysis down to the schools. We are able to do analysis down to the schools. So when we are able to, when we are done with the analysis, it gives us much information as to what is really happening in each of the schools. And it will interest you to know that with the analysis, the schools are able to even see their mean as in literacy and numeracy and do some kind of comparison. And within the district also, such comparisons are done. And then we have the teacher improvement support team that goes to these schools and find out exactly what is ongoing in the schools and try to provide this form of remediation I articulated earlier. So we try to do further and better analysis to find out. Yeah, basically, as we said earlier, the National Standardized Test is a diagnostic assessment that tries to find out what is happening in order to alleviate learning poverty in the school. So we try as much as possible to do every analysis, including the school analysis, span analysis, which we provide remediation. When we see that a teacher is not doing well, living up to expectation, we provide some kind of counseling for the teacher and for him to be motivated and do well. Those that need their capacity to be built, we do that under the Gallup project regime, where funds are provided to the various schools to cater for some of these things. I yield to Sam to add something.
So just quickly, thank you very much.
I yield the
Prof.
floor to Sam, Dr.
Okay.
Samaupu to add, yes.
Can you hear me? So
Yes,
just
yes,
quickly on the
Keep
first,
going.
quickly on the first point from our colleague from Uganda. So as Prof said, Ghana, we operate a centralized HR system. So every teacher working in Ghana, their data is with the Ghana Education Service. The same data will be tracked to the Ministry of Finance and also to the Controller and Accountant General's Department, where the salaries are processed. And then the same is linked to the national security, social security as pension. So you can see that it's a very integrated system that when a teacher is recruited, their biodata is captured. And when it's time for, they themselves also know, they will alert them when retirement is coming. And every year they do a census on teachers. That's address your issue of how the data is collected. And then in terms of tracking who is going to retire, because every year census is collected, the only people who are unfortunately passed, they will be replaced based on requests that are coming from the decentralized level. And then promotion, as Prof said, CPD or professional development is one of them. And then there is a clear HR manual that's defined the various ranks that teachers go through, how many years they need to do before they go to the next level, what performance indicator they need to meet to go to the next level. So that's defined clearly in the HR manual, and that is what is used to promote them. I think that's all I want to add to what Prof just said. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Let me also bring in Dominic regarding Abdul's question on if there are enough African researchers to undertake learning assessment and other forms of research. And while I suspect I know the answer to this question, I'm also conscious of the fact that we've had a protracted conversation or issues around how to exactly measure improvements in learning in Africa and all that. And maybe an answer is yes, we have, but then the next follow-on issue would then be, so why have we not been able to articulate a clear, acceptable metrics or tool to help us measure and see how kids are improving in learning? But Dom, I don't know if you have any opinions on this. Looking at Abdul's from Sierra Leone, his question on if there are African researchers that can help undertake learning assessment and other research.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Abdul. Thank you for the question. I think it's a good question to think through. And the answer is yes, as Chenedu has indicated, there are researchers in Africa to undertake this kind of research. But what we did find out from our mapping exercise and also from some of the discussions we had with African researchers on foundational learning is that there are other problems or other issues that they grapple with that may make them not to be able to undertake these kinds of research. Some of these issues that we found out with African researchers, like from some of the universities, what they were telling us that some things are issues to deal with time. They lack time to. They also lack collaboration because some of this kind of research cannot be done by one person. They need to be able to collaborate, but they do not have this kind of space whether they can come in and find like-minded researchers to collaborate with to be able to undertake this kind of the research in this field. So we are moving forward to try within a few countries that we are working on to bring these researchers together to know each other. It is interesting to find that even within the same universities, you may find two people working, one working in a psychology department, another one in education department. They have the same interest on foundational learning, but they do not know each other, and therefore they don't publish, and this makes that the work not to be visible. But yes, there are researchers that are interested in this field, but they face a bit of some barriers that may make them not be able to produce the work. And we also looked at part of researchers that collaborate with other researchers from outside Sub-Saharan Africa, and we did find, yes, there are some researchers that collaborate, and where they collaborate, then we find they're able to publish even their work in high-impact journals. Yes,
Excellent.
But the answer in short is yes, they are.
Thank you so much, Dom, and I appreciate your views on where it exists. The question I may then have, and I'm not throwing it to anyone in particular, so anyone who has an answer, please come in, will then be, why do we then find it hard on the issue of learning assessment for Africa? And then another follow-on question is, given this current resource context that we have, shortages in personnel, capacities, finances, and all whatnot, what do countries essentially need to do to be able to measure learning effectively, but also use the data that they have to make decisions, at least at an expansive scale in which you can say, like Albert said in his opening, view the culture of data use in decision making. I don't know, maybe Dom, Prof, Sam, anyone?
Well, maybe let me start and others may follow. Yes, I would say that yes, talking about foundational learning specifically, there's a need for us to be committed. There's a need for us to show some level of commitment, by extension, committing resources to these aspects of learning, because it has a much more implication for future academic work. So there's a need for decision makers, politicians, stakeholders to get committed to this task and get the best of its kind to really commit resources there to assess foundational learning. And again, we need to design the best instrument that is tailored towards our goals and aspirations. Most of the instruments that we see around, most of them are not contextualized. They are not in our context. As we speak now, I've initiated a project, commissioned some committees. We are looking at the EGRA-EGMA to see how we can review that entire thing, to contextualize it in Ghana, so that we can meet the UI's benchmarking standards, and as well as SDG Go 411. So we're trying to craft new tests that may be at least better than the EGRA-EGMA that we have. So the expertise is needed at that point to craft the new test to be able to do these things for us, which will include even the socio-emotional learning that we're talking about. So there should be some high commitment at all levels of education to see foundational learning as a bedrock for all other educational activity, future educational activities. Hence, we commit resources to it, and people should be committed. Stakeholders should be highly committed to foundational learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I look and see that we are almost at time, but let me bring in Pauline in. I think Pauline from ESSA, if you have a question or comment, make it brief as we about to round up the session.
Thank you, Chinedu, and good morning, good afternoon all. I just wanted to add to the issue about why we're not getting enough researchers doing the learning assessment type research. And just to add that based on our conversations with lots of researchers in Africa, in institutions, universities, as well as NGOs, what we do here is that you need resource to do this kind of large scale research. And often people are using small scale funding to do research, sometimes even funding it themselves. So for us to have sort of larger scale research that really identifies what is happening with learning in our schools, maybe at national level, resource needs to be committed to it. Also, another challenge is people often say they come up against bureaucratic hurdles. So you need lots of letters from different people to be able to access the schools, obviously for good reason, the safety and all of that. But I think if governments need this information, it would be helpful if they could then reach out to researchers in the institutions and universities, because often they feel there's a bit of a gap, a divide, which is why, as Dominic said, we're trying to bring together researchers, policymakers, educators, practitioners to have common dialogue to see what research is needed, how is it needed, and what can researchers do to support policy-relevant, locally led research. Thank you.
Thanks, Pauline. And I can also see another comment in the chat from Niloufar Javaid. And I think you're giving us some perspectives from Pakistan with regards to data and evidence in limited demand for its use to drive reforms. And if policymakers and stakeholders do not actively value or seek out evidence, aligning it with policy priorities becomes challenging. Strengthening this demand is essential for ensuring buy-in and creating a solid foundation for evidence-informed policymaking. Any insights on how to effectively address this challenge? I'm not sure if we have enough time to take that question. I can also see another hand up from Felix Ngoma. We are running short of time. So Felix, can you in 30 seconds pass your information before I bring in Ami Bellinger to help us wrap up the section?
Thank you. Just to agree with others that the issue of assessment is a problem. Our experience in Zambia is that we have had multiple people doing assessments, but mostly at a micro level. And so sometimes even when we announce national statistics, one wonders how that were arrived at, because the assessments may not have been carried out nationally, and we're just making assumptions here and there. So there's a huge need, and we are willing to learn from others how you are doing the assessment, especially at lower level, on a national scale, so that we have correct and full data rather than just segmented sets and multiple assessments which are not national in character.
Excellent. Thank you, Felix, for the Zambian perspective and experience. And I'm convinced that these things are actually going to come together in some kind of a context that allows us to unpack the issues and then begin to explore and interrogate each of them with the possible solutions we have. Essentially, when we look at ministries, we also realize that sometimes the bureaucracies may also be a challenge unto itself. But whatever that be the case, they are all human beings behind every system. And getting human beings to act in a particular way is always critical to the sort of change we want to see. On that note, I'm happy to ask Ami Berlinga to come in and then help us wrap up this session, which is the first edition of the relaunched Africa Policymaker webinar series. Hopefully, she would be able to set the context for us for subsequent sessions, the survey we need to take, and what should be expected going forward. Ami, please come in.
Thank you so much, Chinedu. It's my role to say a huge thank you to you all as we draw to a close this first session of the African Policymaker Forum on Foundational Learning. I want to express my appreciation for all of you for your presence and your contributions. And as ever, I feel like with everyone contributing and sharing their experiences and their questions and their challenges from the country, the discussion has only just got started. So we'll make a note of some of these questions, perhaps that we dig into deeper next time, particularly I can see around learning assessments. I'm really grateful for the presenters, for the evidence and the rigor that you brought to this. And I think that's meant that we've had food for thought to reflect on and hopefully take action on following this discussion. It was really clear that there's a strong call for action for African-led assessment and research, and for how to do this in a cost-effective yet representative way. And it was great to see the demand for data and evidence. I think one of the areas that we're interested in pursuing a bit further is how do you create that culture? How do you create the training so that anyone can use the data to make decisions within their sphere of responsibility? So looking ahead, I think that's been a really great start. Looking ahead, we will hold another Policymaker Forum in August, where we'll be diving into another topic, one of the ones that we outlined at the beginning of this presentation. We'd really, really value your input into topics that are of interest. We would value your input on how do we make the format of this session most useful? Should we have shorter input, longer time for discussion? How do we make it most successful for you? And therefore, we'll be issuing you a survey that we would love you to complete as soon as the Zoom call ends. So thank you so much once again to all of you for joining, to all the presenters, the representative of the Minister, ADEA, and all our partners. And let's leave here with a renewed sense of energy and purpose on how we harness data and evidence for decision making, so that we can work together to ensure every child in Africa gains the foundational skills they need to thrive. Thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Ami. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, partners. Thank you, country representatives. If you're the technical focal point for your country on foundational learning, don't forget our meeting tomorrow at midday. We will be in touch with additional communications so that we ensure that you benefit from that session. On that note, we're happy to close this session and see you at the next edition.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.